Setting out to become a novelist in the year 2025 after having spent all of my prior years either just reading classical fiction or writing screenplays was much like waking up from a coma. When I began to explore modern fiction titles, attend literary events, and interact with all sorts of book publishers, I found it to be something completely different than what I was expecting. One of the more superficial but most immediate things I noticed was the material of the books themselves. If you go to large retailers like Barnes & Noble or Target, you find that many best-selling books are printed on cheap cardstock with pages so thin you can quite literally see right through them. Secondly, and to preface this, I've never been a big romance or fantasy reader, although when I was younger, I read a handful of series that I did enjoy, like T.A. Barron's Lost Years of Merlin or Catherine Fisher's Relic Master. And when you read titles as a teenager, the simple grammar, the one-dimensional characters and plots are more forgivable. But now, when I stop at these stores to read one of the best-selling fantasy books in the world, I can't even stand reading more than 10 pages of it. The prose is very rudimentary, the dialogue overly expository, and it often employs words the author thinks might sound more highfalutin, but these words stand completely on their own when the rest of the paragraph reads like, frankly, a middle schooler wrote it. As another aside, writers are seemingly now scared of using semicolons. It seems like these days I see countless examples of works where em dashes stand in for where normally there would be a semicolon. I do recall reading more than one literary article talking about this and about rebelling against grammatical norms and so on. But more to the point, I think it reads as more of a limitation than any sort of artistic defiance. If we take the very popular fantasy author Sarah J. Maas, reading the opening of her book A Court of Thorns and Roses, you'll see that she falls into the same phrasing multiple times a page and uses awkward grammar and syntax that, with any good and competent editor, would be easily streamlined. They would remain until the bark ran out, then travel north past the wolves' territory and perhaps into the fairy lands of Prythian, where no mortals would dare go. Not unless they had a death wish. Then 2 more paragraphs later, giant wolves were on the prowl, and in numbers, not to mention whispers of strange folk spotted in the area, tall and eerie and deadly. Then 3 more paragraphs later still, I would have rather spent another night with a hungry belly than found myself satisfying the appetite of a wolf or a fairy. Not that there was much of me to feast on. The phrasing, not that there was X, feels like kind of a crutch, and as a writer myself, I am indeed susceptible to the same stream of consciousness tendency to reuse and recycle words and phrases. That's why rereading the work is so absolutely necessary. Now, here's that last line again, and here is how I would have perhaps rewritten it. Still, I would have rather spent another night with a hungry belly than found myself satisfying the appetite of a wolf or a fairy, not that there was much of me to feast on. Still, I'd sooner have gone hungry another night than end up in the jaws of a wolf or fairy, though now all that was left of me was skin and bones. Now, this might seem like an author cherry-picking another author, and though I've never completely read any of Sarah J. Maas's books, assuming the rest reads like what I just noticed, I would have never wanted to finish it. This brings me to the final point. If I notice such obvious mistakes within the first several pages, but this book has sold over 10 million copies, what does the average reader expect to get out of a book? It seems to me, without dragging up stats and cherry-picking data, that we are in something of a literacy crisis. I don't mean literacy in the traditional sense, I simply mean that we get bored too easily. In an article I wrote in Crisis Magazine entitled Concerning the Death of Catholic Fiction, one of the things I highlight is the fact that literature is supposed to do something distinct from television and social media. It's participatory. The author presents the work, the reader imagines and contemplates. Increasingly, however, it seems that publishers and authors want to just spell out everything and print the most ridiculous and over-the-top covers, as though anticipating that the reader just won't be interested in engaging longer than a 15-minute sitting. More succinctly put, it seems that we have TikTokified literature. So how do we fix this? For one, I believe that artists should not embed their fears of audience taste or attention span into their work. Literature is not always something that is reactive, and the best of it is often very propositional. It asks you a question, it challenges a supposition you hold, or otherwise puts you in an uncomfortable situation. Whether a given reader will assume the gauntlet is on them, but the more literature asks to be more deeply engaged with, the more readers will engage with it. Secondly, publishers care way too much about who their authors are and not what they write. I cannot tell you how many times agents and publishing houses have admitted openly or told me privately how important things like a social media following is. The reality in mass publishing, as in the film industry these days, is that distributors and financiers of art have gradually become risk-averse. To sell a good story, you often have to bring the whole package, either by checking the box of fitting into a marginalized group or category, having a large social media following, or just possessing a lot of money and connections. The writer effectively becomes the publisher, and all the publisher really has to do is take credit. Therefore, if writing becomes the secondary focal point of publishers and agents, it stands to reason that the apparent quality of writing will also diminish. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. If you like what you see, please hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for my book releases and future articles.